Hello everyone and welcome to week 8 of the 20 and 20 challenge. This week we're going to be creating a Ruby on Rails template. So what does that actually mean though? Basically, I was fed up with having to constantly add Devise and Bootstrap to my Rails applications. So I looked into creating some Ruby on Rails templates, which allows you to do some boilerplate stuff at the beginning of each Rails app creation. So in this case, we're going to be covering how to add Bootstrap to your Rails 6 application and how to add Devise with simple form and create Devise usernames that allow you to actually log in whenever you create a new Rails application. We'll also be covering how to create a scaffold. That part's kind of just optional to show how you would do that if you wanted to always have some sort of scaffold created or something. So maybe you do some tutorial stuff and you always need like an articles controller that you want to use. This entire video will help you create that sort of framework for yourself. But why is this so powerful? Well, the reason why you would want to create something like a template system is if you're constantly creating new applications, you might have some applications that need to run with, SQLite, while some run with Postgres. You might use React sometimes, and you might use Vue other times. Or maybe you don't always want to use Devise, sometimes you want to use another alternative, but you don't want to go through that same setup every time because it wastes time, and that's counter to the entire Rails ethos, basically. So in this case, what you can do is you can create a couple of, puts and gets Ruby lines or snippets, and you could say, okay, if you want to add Devise, type yes. If the user hits Y, then you say, okay, well, user wants Devise, so add in Devise. If the user doesn't want Devise, don't add in Devise. So you can just, encapsulate some of your logic there, and then you can add this to some website. And as long as you have a raw version of the Ruby file, you can replace the file name in the Rails new command with the URL for the template wherever it's hosted, and then you'll be able to run this command off of that website URL, which is amazing because if you're using different computers or anything, or you want to share this with other people, it's as easy as just giving them the URL or you're remembering the URL, and you're good to go. You don't have to download the files or anything, so that's great. But that's enough for me. Let's go ahead and let's jump into some code. Okay, so I thought I'd start with what we're actually going to be creating today. So you can see here we have this very basic Bootstrap and Devise website set up. It says demo at the top left. That's the brand or like your website name. It's got a home page and it's got this post controller. You can see here I signed out recently. Each post has a title and a body, and we can put some words in here. And you can see these are all using simple form, bootstrap form, etc. I guess you can't see they're using simple form, but that's what it looks like when you have simple form set up for default bootstrap forms. And then we can create an account. So we'll say something like dry paint as the username, I guess. And it can be test@case.com with a password of password. You can see up here the username is being displayed. So dry paint. We can come into account settings. We can edit this. I can log out. And I can click log in, and I should be able to log in with both this email, and then if I log out, I can log in as dry paint, I believe, and that will also let me log in. Now we've covered this before, and on the surface these features aren't anything new on this channel. The difference is how I'm creating this application. So normally when we create a new application, we have to set up Devise, Bootstrap, simple form. What I'm actually doing here is if I type ls, so I have this create app, and if I full screen my terminal, I can type cat create app, and you can see what this command is. So it's actually running Rails new, it's calling the app demo, and then it's passing in this -m flag, which is saying use a template. And instead of using a template file like this template.rb, I've actually uploaded this template.rb to a GitHub gist. And then I'm just putting in the link for that entire gist right here. I'm putting in the link to the raw version, of course. And then I'm just saying skip Spring because I'm doing some testing, so I'd like Spring not to run. And what happens when we run this create app script, so let me actually, before I run it, I need to rm-rf demo. And now we're going to run create app, and you should see that when I run this command, it's going to create a whole bunch of stuff. So it's going to create the basic Rails application that we're familiar with, but it's also going to create in this folder, I don't have the folder open. Okay, so in this folder, when I run this command, you'll see it'll create the new Rails application called demo. And it's going to add in Devise, Bootstrap, and everything else. So if you're watching the terminal, you should see some of those commands run. And if I open this up and I come into the gem file, we should see it, you know, like right here, it added the Devise gem. So if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see Devise in simple form. You can see here that it's running, you know, the Webpacker command, which is fairly standard. But we can like come into our app and our views, and we should see some things start to pop in. I can also open up models if I want to. And if I come into config, webpack, and like environment.rb, we'll also be able to see that it's adding in Bootstrap. Now, I'm not entirely sure how the formatting for this is going to work. That was the one part that I didn't have enough time to test, because the way this works is you're writing all of this text into the files using Ruby. So I kind of had to, you know, wing a lot of that stuff myself. But if I start, you know, exploring through here, we'll start to see some of the changes that it's adding. Like right now, it's going to be generating the simple form. After it generates simple form, it'll run the Devise generators. So right here, you can see Devise install, and then the generate Devise install. And I think at one point, it's actually going to generate the Devise. Well, there's the user, adding the string for the username and the admin boolean. But it's also going to create the Devise views for us. So here we have the user.rb. And if I open this, it'll be the default user. But it's going to start modifying this file as well, because it has to add in all of the stuff that we normally do when we create usernames that allow you to log in. So right here, you can see now it just added in the validations. So yeah, the formatting is off a little bit still, but you can see we didn't have to type all of this. It's just doing all of this by itself, which is really nice, because this is actually a lot of work whenever you have to do this. It's now adding in Bootstrap, jQuery, and Popper with Yarn, and it's going to do all of that setup as well. And I think, you know, if you combined all of those tutorials together, you're probably looking at about 45 minutes worth of work that this just set up for you. So if we come into like environment for Webpack, you'll see that we have our Webpack set up for jQuery, Popper, and Bootstrap stuff. Although here it's mostly just jQuery and Popper. I can come into JavaScript, packs, application. Here it's importing, oops, that formatting's off. Here it's importing Bootstrap and application.scss. It also makes the folder for that and the file. And here you have the Bootstrap file. So that's all of the stuff that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be creating this one little script that creates a basic application that you can then, you know, jump off of. So we're saving ourselves the time of the setup. And by putting this on a website, it allows you to basically run this script whenever you want to without needing to download anything. So let's go ahead and let's open up our just a blank Ruby file. So for this, I called it Devise Bootstrap template.rb. You could call it template.rb. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you're in the same directory as that template file if you're going to be running it. And the first thing we're going to do is we need to, I guess, require file utils, which is something we're going to be using later. So this is for, I think, writing and reading to files because of how we're modifying some of the files. Now, for a lot of this, we're just going to be adding some basic functions, and a lot of the magic will be handled for us. So here I'm just adding in Devise and simple form, and then I can say def setup simple form, and then I can call the generate command, which if you've run the simple form installer before, you know this is Rails g simple _form : install. bootstrap. So that's what we're going to do in here. We call generate space, and then in the string, it's the same as the command would be. So simple underscore form :install bootstrap. I'm going to actually full screen this because we're probably going to be in here for a while. The next thing we can do is we can come down and we can actually, let me just find it in my file over here. We can start by, creating this application a couple times. So we'll start by saying source paths, which is a function we have to create. And then we'll call add gems, which is shockingly going to add the gems. And then down here we can do an after bundle, which is going to run after the bundle command runs. And here we can just say the first thing I want to do is set up simple form because we've added the gems. So now we need to run the setup simple form to generate the simple form. After we do that, we want to do something, and I'm going to comment this out. We want to say like setup users. I then want to cover the like demoing the Rails commands. So this is like creating the post scaffold. And then I want to cover adding bootstrap, and then we can add the bootstrap navbar. So that's the basic layout of what we're going to do. So we'll just go in this order, and yeah, we can cover things as we go along. So the first thing we need to do is this source paths function. So for that, we can just come up here and say def source paths end. And then inside of some square brackets, we just do underscore dir underscore. And that's just going to set the source paths for us and, use the dir for us. So that's fairly, I don't know, standard, I guess. You don't really have to worry about what this is doing. Just make sure you're setting the source paths before you add the gems and run some of these files. The next thing we want to do is create this setup users function. So for this, I'm going to uncomment the setup users. And then below the source paths, I'm going to say def setup users end. And for this, the first thing we need to do, of course, is say generate devise :install. Now, I don't normally cover this, but we can also do the configuration of the action mailer. So for this, we can say environment, and then inside quotes, config.actionMailer.default URL options is equal to, and then inside of some braces, we can say the host is localhost, the port is 3000, end a brace, then a comma. Then we could say env is development. Okay, now we can do our generate for devise. So we can say, like, this is the equivalent of Rails g devise user. So we have the Rails is implied, then generate devise user command, and then we're adding in a username, which is a string unique. And then we have the admin : boolean. So that's going to create the user model and add those fields. We can now run a Rails command itself and say db : migrate. And, for some of these things, it's probably not going to be the most optimal way of doing it. But as usual, I try to show you guys all of the ways to do things so that you can then put your projects together how you feel. So for this, we're going to say generate devise : views. Because I'm really not a big fan of just, saying do this and then you're done. I really like people to, have their own ability to express their creativity. So we're going to be doing a couple different approaches to solving some of the problems we're going to run into. For this one, we need to call inroot do, and we're going to do the migration here. So we're going to say migration is equal to dir.glob. And we need to grab the db/migrate/*max by, and we need to say f file.mtime f. Then we can space this, and then we can come down to the next one, and then we can say gsub file migration /:admin/ and then single quotes :admin, comma, default false. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're grabbing the migration for like the maximum migration. We're saying grab the admin field and just set admin to be false by default. So if we had, you know, this table in our database, it'd be like t.blah blah blah user. You have the admin, which is of type Boolean, and then at the end normally you just say comma, default false, and that's all we're doing here. It just requires a bit more magic to actually, you know, grab the proper file name. But this will set the admin Boolean to be false inside of the root of our project. Next thing we need to do is we need to set up the application controller. Now, if I come over to Google and I look for Devise username login, I'm going to zoom into 150%. If we come into this page, so we've already added the usernames. So that's the username string unique that we have over here. We ran our migration, and now we need to modify the application controller. So instead of creating a new file, we need to do something similar to what we did with this gsub. But here, what we can actually do is we can use this, this method called inject into file. And we can inject into the app/controllers/application_controller.rb file. Now, just as a note, ideally what you would want to do is say something like rails.root.join, and then you would want to join the app, the controllers, and then the application controller.rb files. Because if you're assuming that you're maybe going to run this on different environments, you might run into problems with Windows using, you know, one type of slash and Linux using the other type. But, you know, it's just more noise in an already very messy file. So I decided to leave that out, but I just thought I'd mention it. So you might need to do some Rails joins if you want to be compatible across platforms with something like this. So when you inject into the file, it takes 2 arguments, and then it takes a do block. So the first argument is the file that we're injecting into, and the second argument is going to be where we're putting the stuff that we want to put into the file. So for this, we're going to say before the end of the document. So because we know that application controller.rb is a Ruby file, we know it's going to have like a def, and it's going to have an end, or it's going to have a class and an end. So we can grab the end block, and it's going to grab the properly indented one. So it's going to grab the last end block in the application controller. So we have the last end, and we're injecting before that last end. So we want to start with a new line, and honestly, we want to end with a new line. That way our stuff is just sort of away from everything else. We can then say like maybe before action, configure permitted parameters if : devise controller. And another option you have here is if you already have an application that has set this up before, you can just grab it, copy paste it, and add your new lines if you want them. If not, a lot of the formatting will be preserved just inside of these strings from doing the copying and pasting. But for this, I'm going to try and make this a bit more obvious what I'm doing. I'm not entirely sure if this is going to work in terms of formatting, but hopefully you guys will be able to follow along with what I'm doing here. So we have our before action. We then create a protected block with a new line. So we say before action, new line, then protected, then we have a new line, and then we say def configure permitted parameters, which is our before action function that we're defining now. And then in this, we need to say, we'll add a new line. So, you know, we do this, we go down one line, we say added attrs is equal to, and we're adding in a username, email, password, password confirmation. And I think remember me is one of them. Looks good. Then we come down to another line and we say devise parameter sanitizer dot permit the sign underscore up with keys of added attrs. And then we have another /n, and we can actually get rid of the space because these are on the same line. Devise parameter sanitizer dot permit account update with the keys added attrs. So this is just what we did last time. Just make sure you have your end and that you're adding in your new lines as necessary. We don't actually need this one now. I guess I can do this so it's a bit more clear. So, you know, exactly what we would normally do. These new lines I don't think are going to be necessary, so you're going to have like double lines in places, but hopefully it's sort of clear what's happening here by doing it like this. So this is going to inject our permitted parameters into the application. And then after we inject these files, we then need to come down here and we need to say, because the next step after you do the application controller is to add in the attr writer. So what we could do for this is we could either do everything in the username or in the user.rb at once, or we could do multiple injections. So I think for this, we're going to do everything at once. So we're going to be in this one for a little bit. But this is going to be another instance of saying like inject into file. It needs to be the app/models/user.rb. And then we're going to say before the end do, and we can come down here and end it. And for this, we're going to say /n validates username, presence true, uniqueness, case sensitive is false. I'm just going to put this down here because we're going to be in here for a while. And then I'll add in my spaces here just to fix my formatting a bit. So after we validate the username's case sensitivity and the presence, we then want to do a validate, and we want to just say validate username, which we'll have to create in a second here. We then also have a attr_writer, which is login. We have the def login, which is @login or username or email. End. And you'll see here this time I'm not using my /n's. Hopefully it's a bit clearer, like sort of what we're going for. I really can't be bothered to put in that many /n's, I'm sorry. But this will hopefully be preserved once we run this. But we can call validate username end. And then in here we can say errors.add. So this is like if the username is invalid. So if username invalid, if user.where the email is the username.exists. So we're just making sure, you know, if like Ted at example.com is someone's email, that someone else can't create a username equal to Ted at example.com. Because then you could you'd run into some issues where because you're using both to be able to log in, these two would try to both log into the same thing and you'd run into some conflicts. You obviously don't want that. And the last thing we have to do in here, I believe, is the def self.find for database authentication with the warden conditions. For this, we say conditions are equal to warden conditions.doop. If the login is equal to the conditions.delete login. Then we say where the conditions.toHash.where lower. So we're checking the lowercase username is equal to value, or this needs to be capital OR. Well, it doesn't, I don't think it needs to, but it should be capital OR. Or the email is equal to value. And then we do a single quote, comma, and then a brace. And inside this brace, we need to say value login.downCase. Then we can end the brace, end the square bracket, end the parentheses, and then we call dot first. And once that's done, we can hopefully come back over here. We can say else if conditions dot key question mark username or conditions dot key question mark email, where conditions dot 2h dot first end, and then we can bring this new line back to here, and this should be it for the user model. So we skipped quite a few steps here. You know, we did all this login stuff, and then if I come down here, there's a database authentication, and then we covered this issue here with the validate username. But we do still need to inject into the Devise initializers to say use the login condition, which is up here. So we need to add this config authentication keys. So for this one, what do we do? Because of how, if I open this, we can actually come in here and take a look. Because of how the config initializers devise.rb file is set up, we could inject before the end, which would be all the way down here, and just add it right here. But there is actually a section here for this, which is the config.authentication keys. And you can see here sort of how I handled this. I found this comment with the email, and then after it, I just popped this in. So let's go ahead and let's try that, because we've used before up until now. Let's see how we would use after. So for this, we can say inject into file, config /initializers /devise.rb, comma, after, and then I'm going to put in this, the comment symbol, so the pound, space, config dot authentication keys equals email. And then after this, we're going to say do, and then we'll have the end block. And in here, all we want to do is say, create it. So we'll open up a string, /n, tab over config.authentication _ keys is equal to square brackets login. And then we'll just add in a new line below that, and we should be good to go. So the next thing we need to do is change our views, because if we come into app, views, devise, and let's say like sessions new, we change, first of all, we're using simple form, so we do need to keep that in mind because our input changes here. But by default, this should say like email, because we're adding in the login manually. So we need to change that email to login. So how do we do that? Well, we can't really inject into the file here because we're not looking for the email to inject into. In like registrations we are. If I come into new registration, you can see here I'm just injecting the username into the registration, or if we come into like the edit page, I guess, you have the username being injected before the email. But inside of the sessions.new, we need to like fully replace this, right? So how do we deal with that? Well, what we can do is a sort of like a third way of dealing with this. And we can create our own method for finding something in a file and replacing it. So we'll come out of our user and like all the way down here. We'll say def find and replace in file. This will take 3 arguments. The first one will be the file name. The second one will be the old content. And the third one will be the new content. Then in here we need to say text is equal to file.read. We need to read the file underscore name. New contents, so plural, is equal to text.gsub, old content, new content. Then we want to say file.open, file name, pass in a W for write, I believe. Then we need to say file, and then we want to do file.write the new contents. And now we can call this method inside of our user, and we can say something like find and replace in file. The file name is going to be app/views/devise/sessions/new.html.erb. The thing that we want to replace is email. We want to replace it with login. With login. And now that's pretty much it. So that's, just another way you can do this. We'll of course go back to doing injections now because this next part is actually fairly easy to handle. So we say inject into file app/views/devise/registrations/new.html.erb. And we want to say before the open up some Ruby code, f.input email do. So we're not grabbing the whole thing because we're fairly confident this is enough to get a unique result. And then before the email, we just want to say /n, and then do f.input username, and then we'll do a /n so that it's on a new line, because I think in the new.html.erb or inside of the registrations edit maybe, we had this right here where the username was on the same line as the email, and we just want to make sure that doesn't happen. So we'll just do it this way. We'll add in 2 new lines. And then on the next line, we can say inject into file app/views/devise/registrations/edit.html.erb. And it looks like this is actually the file that had the new line issue. And for this, again, we just want to say f.input email do end. And here again, we just want to say inside quotes /n f.input username /n. And I think that's it for our user account creation. So as you can see here, this is something that normally you would have to do every time, and it's what, 20 to about 80, so about 60 lines of code. Now, granted, you don't need to write like half of these because they're just function calls, but like writing and changing all these files and doing all this stuff can be quite tedious. So if you take the time to set up a proper template, I could actually see this saving quite a bit of time in the long run. But now that we have this devise portion set up for adding our usernames, if we come down here, the next thing we can do is demo the Rails commands. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create this function. We'll call it like demo Rails commands. And then we can come up here and we can just say below the find and replace, def demo Rails commands end. And then in here, all we have to do is say generate a controller. And we'll just say pages controller with a home action. We can then set a route. And for this, we'll do a route to pages controller home action, just like we normally would. This should be ROUTE. We can then do a Rails command to generate a scaffold. We'll call it post. We'll give it a title of type string, body of type text, and we can call --no -scaffold -style sheet. And what this lovely little flag does, if we come up to demo app assets, obviously you can't do this because you haven't run this yet, It stops the application from creating the scaffolds.scss style sheet. So that's the other benefit of using a template, is you can bake in no more scaffold style sheets, at least for these commands. You could, of course, set this flag in other places to stop it from generating entirely. But that's not what we're covering today. The next thing we can do is say Rails command db:/migrate. Rails command db:/migrate. So this will create the root of our application, run the scaffolds generator, and then run a migration. So that's pretty cool. That covers creating the post scaffold as well, which means the only thing we have left is adding Bootstrap and then adding the Bootstrap navbar. So let's start with Bootstrap. We'll say add Bootstrap. I'll just enter this down a bit. And then we can come into add Bootstrap. Let me just find it in my code example so I can cover it. Let's come right here and we'll just say def add Bootstrap end. And for this one, I'm going to be referencing one of the posts on the blog that I started for this channel. So if you go over to deandhart.com, there will be a link in the description. One of the recent blog posts that I created as of recording this video, of course, covers adding Bootstrap to a Rails 6 application. So if I scroll down here, we'll have all of the commands that we need to run. So we need to run the Rails G controller pages home, which we've already done. We need to call yarn add for Bootstrap, jQuery, and Popper. We then need to set the routes, which we already did. We then need to add in the commands to set up our environment. So inside of our config webpack environment.js, we need to add in this stuff. After we do that, we then need to add in into our application JavaScript file, we need to add in import bootstrap and import stylesheets.application.scss, which also means we need to create that folder. So in our JavaScript folder, we need to come into packs. We need to create the style sheets folder and then this application.scss file. And then inside of that, we need to call this at import stuff. So that's what we're about to do. It is quite a bit, and it is, of course, going to save more time by doing it in a template. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so right here, we can just say, let's run the yarn command. So we can just type run yarn add bootstrap jQuery popper.js. Let me full screen this again. Next thing we need to do, again, is inject into file config/webpack/environment.js. And before the last line in that file, which is module.exports equals environment, environment, we can then say do end. And then we can add in that middle code off of the website. So in here, it was this stuff right here. So we'll add in like quotes const webpack equals require webpack. Then environment.plugins.append. And we'll say provide inside of single quotes. Make sure that you're using the same type of quotes when you do this. Then we can say new webpack dot provide plugin. If you don't use the same type of quotes, it will break because you're going to, or if you do use the same type of quotes, it'll break because you're going to have something like if I create double quotes right here and I say jQuery, I'm sort of escaping the string and we don't want that. So we want single quotes, jQuery, comma, and the next line, J capital Q query is jQuery. And then popper, capital P, colon, and this is just setting up the aliases that we're going to use. And then we'll say default. And then we can come down here to the brace, and then below this we need to close the parentheses, and then we can say /n. And that should be it. And then we have our end right here. And then we just come down another line. And then we need to inject into file for our app/javascript/packs/application.js. And then after the last line in there that is included by default. So if we come up here to application.js, this is the last line. So we just grab that and we say after this, do end. And then here we just need to do, we could say like new line, import bootstrap with single quotes again, semicolon. Then we can say import single quotes dot slash style sheets slash application dot scss, single quotes to end it, semicolon, and then slash new line. Now we need to actually create the style sheets folder, and this is why we included the file utils. All the way at the top at the start of this tutorial, we had require file utils because we're going to be doing a file utils call to make a directory. So it's the command is file utils.mkdir_p, and then we're going to say make a directory in app/javascript/packs, and we're going to call it style sheets. The next thing we can do is just create a quick path here. So we'll say app_scss is equal to app/javascript/packs/style sheets/application.scss. And then you have a couple options. We're going to do it a bit more of a verbose way. You could just create a file and save it or something. I'm just going to say file utils.touch app_scss. So by touching it, that's going to create the file. And then after, we can then say append to file. So this doesn't take a before and an after. This just says in this file, append this at the end of it, basically, which in this case is also the beginning. And then we'll just say /n at import, single quotes, tilde. So that's the grave key next to your 1 on your keyboard, above tab and below escape if you're on a US keyboard, US English. Then you have tilde bootstrap, let me make sure I spell that right, /scss/bootstrap, single quotes, semicolon, /n. And then we can say end there, and that will stop, or that will finish the add bootstrap command. So the final thing that I cover here, or that I wanted to cover, was adding a bootstrap navbar. So down here, what we can say is like add bootstrap navbar. And what we can do below this def bootstrap, we can say def add bootstrap navbar. Right? It looks like I typoed it. So add bootstrap navbar. And for this, again, we're going to have to create a file. So the first thing we'll do is we'll say navbar is equal to app/views/layouts/_navbar.html.erb. Then we say file utils.touch navbar, so that'll create this _navbar.html.erb file. And then we can say inject into file app/views/layouts/application.html.erb, and before the yield tag, do. And in here we just want to say render layouts/navbar, single quotes, and the Ruby code, and then /n. So that covers that. Let's now go grab the actual navbar code. So for this, we can come over to the Bootstrap 4 docs. So we'll search for Bootstrap 4 documentation in Google. We'll click on one of the links to getbootstrap.com. We'll search for navbar. Click on the first result, scroll down a bit until we find a navbar. We'll click copy, and then we can full screen this project again. And then inside of some quotes here, actually we need to say append to file navbar do end. And then inside of some quotes in here, single quotes, we can paste this in. And now we can go through here and we can customize this a bit. So for this Navbar brand, so the class is Navbar-brand, so we need to remember that. We can say link to, and we want to give this a name that's not the same every time. So let's say something like rails.application.class.parent_name, which will just get the like sort of a readable version of the Rails application based on what we name the application. So it's good enough to prototype. You can always change this once you start editing your templated application. And then we do the root path, and then for the class we say set the class to be Navbar-brand. And you'll see because Bootstrap used double quotes by default, here I use single quotes to wrap around this, and I'm using double quotes inside of the Ruby code just to make sure that I don't have to change everything here. So, you know, that sets the Navbar link right there. We can now do stuff with like the home link, I guess. So here we have the home link. It has a class of nav-link. So let's just say link to home, and then the root path with a class of nav-link. Then we also have a link to the post path that we could do. So we could say link to posts, and this could be the post path with a class of nav-link. We can grab our drop down here, we can cut this out, and we can get rid of this disabled link right here. We can get rid of this search form, and we can say, let's create a UL with a class equal to navbar-nav ml-auto, which will push it to the right side with an automated left margin. That way we can have our usernames in the on the right side of the navbar. And then here we can say something like if current user else end. So we tab this over maybe. So if you are logged in, then we want to show that drop down that we had a second ago. So let me tab this over here, and I guess we can tab all of this back one so that's a bit more consistent. So for this drop down, we could say something like just link, or not even link to, we could just say current_user.username. And unlike my other tutorials, this time this username is actually a real username that you can log in and out with. It's funny how that works. The other thing is inside this dropdown, because we want to make it so that if you click on the user, which I think is still here. Yeah, if you click on this, this dropdown needs to always be on the screen. So we need to say that this is a right side dropdown menu. Otherwise it might float off if the username is too long or too short. I can't remember which. And for that, inside of the div class equals dropdown menu, we can just say dropdown -menu -right as a second class to add on to here, and that'll fix that. And then for this first A link, we'll say link to account settings. Then we can say like edit user registration path with a class of dropdown -item. We can get rid of this next one right here unless you wanted to do something like a link to, I don't know, new post. So we could say link to new post path, I think is what the path is. Then we can say class of dropdown -item. And then we can come over here, and for this last one, we can create a link to log out. So we can say link to log out. This is the destroy user session path with a method : delete, lowercase delete, and a class of dropdown -item. And then down here, if we're not the current user, then we need to like either create an account or log in. So let's grab this link for the post path. So this li, and we'll just paste it in once and then twice. And then we'll fix this indentation like that. So first one, we'll say if you're not logged in, then maybe you want to create an account. This is going to be the new user registration path. And maybe you already have an account, so in that case, maybe you just want to log in, which is going to be the new user session path. And that's going to do it for creating that navbar right there. And assuming we did all of this correctly, which after 180 lines of code is a very brave assumption on my part, we should be able to maybe come over to our terminal and try to create a Rails app here. So of course I had that create app file right here, which has a whole bunch of stuff in it, but this isn't hosted on a server yet or on a website anywhere. So we can really just use this from our folder directory right here. So this is the name of my file, devise_bootstrap_template. So I'll just say Rails. Oops, looks like my terminal is freezing. I don't know what's happening here. Yep, okay. So what we can do now is we can say Rails new, and I'll call this like week 8 template app space, and then I'll say -m, and then I'll add in the devise_bootstrap_template.rb. So this is the full command right here. And then you can also add in like skip spring if you wanted to, but this is the first time we're running this, so I should be good to just try this and see what happens. So let's go ahead and run this. And unfortunately, when you're creating a template like this, one of the things you'll run into is it's kind of annoying to debug because it's going to create the entire Rails app and it's not going to break until eventually it gets to like that line in the installation process. And if your issue is, in setting up simple form, sure, that's okay. You just run through the initial setup and then the first time you get to simple form, it breaks. But if your issue is like in your add bootstrap, if you have a typo or something, you could be sitting here for around 5 minutes or even longer, depending on how big your setup is. So that's one of the downsides to creating these templates, is it can be kind of a pain to do that. But it looks like right here, we're generating the simple form installer. So that's good. If we open up this folder and we go into app views, we should start to see things pop in because of course, the first thing we have is Devise. So if I open up models and our controllers, we know that there's going to be some files added in there. So here's the user model. There's nothing in here yet, of course. And here's our application controller. It just generated the Devise views. It just added in the application controller stuff. And you can see here, because we had all of those extra /n's, that's where all of these lines are coming from. But if we come into user, this looks a little bit better. Of course, the indentation is off because I had my spaces set to 4 instead of 2. So that's something we could take a look at fixing real quick. Let me just tab this over once. But it looks like so far we're already on to adding the bootstrap stuff. So the users presumably work. And bootstrap actually work too, so we might be good here. I'm going to close this without saving. And then I'm going to ls, and then I'm going to cd into this week 8 template app. And I'm going to type Rails S to start the server so we can see what that actually did for us. So of course we'll go over to, let me just move this around. We'll go over to localhost port 3000. Webpacker is going to compile. And then hopefully we'll see something similar to this page appear without any nasty errors like me forgetting how to do anything. So here we have the week 8 template app in the top left. So you can see this is a new application. I didn't just rename the old one to trick you guys. We have our posts with no posts in here yet. We can create an account and log in. So let's try to create an account. For username, I'll just call this test space case. I'll give the email, let's say, I don't know, like example@test.com. with a password of password. And then if we look right here in the top right, we have test case with the ability to go to a new post or edit our account settings. So let's go to new post, takes us to the right place. So say, hello world. I can't believe this worked first try. And then we'll hit create post. And you can see it's inserted into the database. So if we hit back, refresh, all of this seems to be working. You can, of course, delete the post as well. Let's maybe, I don't know, edit our account settings. So we'll change the username to TestyTest. And we'll add in our current password. And now we can see our username is TestyTest. So we'll log out. We'll log in as TestyTest. And yeah, everything seems to be working. So I think that's going to do it for this short little project. We could, of course, fix the indentations of the user model. So if we come into, or inside of the application controller. So the reason why all those spaces were there was because of all of these new lines. What you could do, now that you have this application, is come into like the application controller. Into the application controller. And maybe you fix all of this. So let me do that real quick. I'll fix all of these weird space issues. So if I save this, maybe RuboCop will do some of this for me. And then I do this. And that looks good. I tab this over. And then maybe I hit like enter right here. And I get rid of this ending space right there. So now we can just copy this right here. And we can come over to our Bootstrap template. And we can say, you know, we have this new line. We have this last line right here. Let's just paste all of this in and save it just like that. And now if you run this, this should end up looking just about how it does right here. And you can do that for all of your files, wherever you find anything that looks a little weird. So let's go into config and webpack environment. This actually looks okay, I think. But maybe, I don't know, views, layouts, application. Yeah, so maybe you'd want to like change this so that these were tabbed over or something. And then as you clean it up and you keep adding in your Devise Bootstrap template, you can like cd out of this, remove it. So rm-rf week 8 template app. Run the same command again, but maybe this time you need to do like --skip -spring, or you'll run into problems with things probably like still thinking it exists as a scaffold or whatever. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. We're already about an hour in. You know, for an hour, I think we did a lot here. This is, of course, very powerful because the more work you put into this template, the better your future applications will be. Okay, so that's going to do it for Week 8's 20 and 20 project. This one was a little weird. I don't know what inspired this, aside from my endless annoyance at having to constantly add in Devise usernames at the start of videos. We'll probably still be doing that going forward because I can't expect people to watch this entire project to understand what we're doing. But I thought it was, you know, something that a lot of people would get value out of. Hopefully you did. Hopefully this helped. If it didn't, you know, you're always free to dislike the video. That way other people know, stay away from this video. I sort of encourage that on this channel because I do appreciate the honesty in you guys supporting the videos as opposed to you just supporting them because you can. So, you know, that is appreciated. But if you like this video, remember to like it. If you didn't like it, remember to dislike it, of course. If you want to see more, we've got 12 more weeks. So weeks 13 through 20 on the channel. We also have some other content coming out, and there will be stuff coming after that. The videos might be going down to 3 a week going forward because I actually just got hired, hilariously, because of this YouTube channel, or at least in part because of it. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. I will see you guys in the next video, and have a wonderful day.